Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back. I hope that you are all well. This is where I talk about the books that I'm reading, and I like to read diverse books and I highlight Canadian literature. If you are new, thanks so much for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. Today I am continuing along the journey of Tuesdays with Toni, which is the reading project that I am doing with my friend AJ from AJ Dunn Reads and Writes. We are reading all of Toni Morrison's novels in publication order throughout this year, and today I am talking about Jazz by Toni Morrison. I will leave a link to our introduction videos along with the playlist in the description box so you can go and check those out. I will also leave our reading schedule in case you want to read along. This is our 6th book, so we are over the halfway mark, and this is the 2nd book in the Beloved trilogy. Jazz was published in 1992, so 5 years after Beloved, and this is not a continuation of the story in Beloved. It doesn't have connecting characters, but it does have similar themes, which Brian also pointed out. Brian from Bookish pointed that out when he commented on my Beloved video. So you can read these books independently of each other. You don't need any backstory or anything like that in order to enjoy both of them on their own. So in the foreword of Jazz, Toni Morrison writes, this is on Roman numeral 16, Beloved unleashed a host of ideas about how and what one cherishes under the duress and emotional disfigurement that a slave society imposes. One such idea, love as perpetual mourning or haunting, so here she's talking about Beloved, led me to consider a parallel one, how such relationships were altered later in or by a certain level of liberty. And there she's talking about Jazz. An alteration made abundantly clear in the music. I was struck by the modernity that Jazz anticipated and directed, and by its unreasonable optimism. Whatever the truth or consequences of individual entanglements and the racial landscape, the music insisted that the past might haunt us, but it would not entrap us. It demanded a future, and refused to regard the past as an abused record with no choice but to repeat itself at the crack, and no power on earth could lift the arm that held the needle. I love that. I mean, the writing and the concept and just the whole thing, it's incredible. I mean, even her foreword is beautifully written. So what happens in this story? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to read the first paragraph because I was captivated by it, and I think you will be too. So it begins like this. I know that woman. She used to live with a flock of birds on Lenox Avenue. Know her husband too. He fell for an 18-year-old girl with one of those deep down, spooky loves that made him so sad and happy. He shot her just to keep the feeling going. When the woman, her name is Violet, went to the funeral to see the girl and to cut her dead face, they threw her to the floor and out of the church. She ran then, through all that snow, and when she got back to her apartment, she took the birds from their cages and set them out of the windows to freeze or fly, including the parrot that said, I love you. That opening paragraph is incredible for many reasons, one of which is that it sums up what happens in the story. This isn't a murder mystery or thriller. There's nothing to be solved. We know who is dead, and we know who did it. What Jazz is about is how we got to this point and what happened afterward. And that leads me to the structure of the story. There are, in some ways, there's no proper chapters. They're kind of just divided sections, and many of them seem to start as though they were mid-sentence, and the point of view changes from section to section. So we get, I would say, a lot of layers through the different perspectives. There's Joe, who is the murderer of his teenage lover named Dorcas, And Jo is married to Violet. We get Violet's perspective. She is sometimes called violent because of what she did to the dead girl. And she also befriends Alice, who is Dorcas's aunt. And then we get Alice's perspective. Because we get the backstory of Jo's earlier life and Violet's earlier life, we also have some perspectives of characters from those times. And then because we obviously can't get the perspective of Dorcas, since she is now dead, we have Felice, who is Dorcas's friend, and she fills in some of the gaps in the narrative. So at the beginning of the story, Dorcas still seems to have some kind of power after her death. Jo and Violet even have a picture of her that they both admire. And at first, I thought that this was going to be similar to Beloved, in that Dorcas would haunt them in some ways, which is kind of true, but it's more about, I think, that the past lives on in some way, even for the living, which was a major theme in Beloved as well. So the characters of Jo and Violet, who have, both been the instigators of violent acts, they get fleshed out more when we learn of their past. And Jo has lived his life reinventing himself all the time and has in many ways changed who he is depending on the circumstances he's in. And because of Violet's past, we learn what Dorcas represented to her. We even get an idea of Dorcas's past because Aunt Alice tells how Dorcas's parents both died in the Chicago race riots. And I thought Toni Morrison did a really great job at placing the story in history. So there is an understanding of the pressures and tensions without having to hammer out all of the details. So I'd like to focus on maybe the character that had the most impact for me, and also the relationship that had the most impact. Jo's character I found fascinating, because never once did I ever really dislike the guy. In fact, even the characters in the book like him. He has a charisma about him. He likes people. He was kind to them, and they like him. And I thought the way that Toni Morrison wrote his character was brilliant, because there is so much sympathy for him. And then the relationship that I thought was most interesting was Violet, Jo's wife, and Alice, Dorcas's aunt. After Dorcas dies, Violet begins visiting Alice. And their relationship, which, don't get me wrong, it does start off a bit rocky, but I found it was so intriguing. Like, one of the themes in the book is violence, and both of these women represent violence, but in very different ways. And they also help each other in healing. So I talked about violence, which is closely related to another common theme for Toni Morrison, which is the treatment of women. So in jazz, that's also a major theme. Obviously, women are killed. They are also raped and dismissed. And I think that one of the most interesting themes in this story in particular is jazz music. Now, it seems obvious, but before reading the book, I wasn't sure if it was going to be about jazz, like the music, or have a character named Jazz. But Morrison is very clever in how she uses jazz in the book. It is mentioned at pivotal times, and the music is in some ways a character in itself. And in the foreword, Toni Morrison says that this story was inspired by a story that she had read in the Harlem Book of Dead, where a photographer tells the story of a girl who has been shot by her sweetheart at a party. But what I absolutely loved was the inspiration for jazz in the story. And I would like to read that to you because it's inspired by Toni Morrison's mom. And she at first begins writing about how she was frustrated in her writing and how jazz became, I'm going to say, the spine of the story. So this begins on Roman numeral 17. My mother was 20 years old in 1926, my father 19. 5 years later, I was born. They had both left the South as children, chock full of scary stories, coupled with a curious nostalgia. They played the records, sang the songs, read the press, wore the clothes, spoke the language of the 20s, debating endlessly the status of the Negro. I remember opening the metal trunk, sitting like a treasure chest in the hall. The lock, clasped shut, but not key-locked, was thrilling. Its round head, the cylinders, everything fit and clicked and obeyed. The lid was heavy, but silent on its hinges, an appropriately stealthy entrance into this treasure that I have been cautioned never, ever to approach. I am too young to be in school, and the days are endless without my sister. She is solemn and important now that she has a daily appointment, first grade, and I have nothing to do. My mother is in the backyard. No one else is in the house. So no one will know how accommodating the lock is, how quietly the lid rises. The treasure I believe is hidden there does not disappoint. Right on top of crepe dresses is an evening purse, tiny, jeweled, with fridge dangled in jet and glass. My mother hears the scream, but I don't. I only remember the crack of pain as the trunk lid smashes my hand, then waking up in her arms. I thought she would be angry at me for my disobedience, but she is not. She is soothing, sings a little as she massages my hand, rubs it with a triangle of ice. I had fainted. What an adult thing to do. How jealous my sister will be when I tell her about the pain. How grown up I felt and how loved. But seeing examining the purse, the treasure, I would not describe that to her. I would keep this glimpse of my mother's world before I was born to myself. It was private, it was glittery, and now it was mine as well. Following Beloved's focus on mother love, I intended to examine couple love, the reconfiguration of the self in such relationships, the negotiation between individuality and commitment to another. Romantic love seemed to me one of the fingerprints of the 20s, and jazz its engine. Although I had a concept, its context, a plotline, characters, data, I could not establish the structure where meaning rather than information would lie, where the project came as close as it could to its idea of itself, the essence of the so-called jazz age. The moment when an African-American art form defined, influenced, reflected a nation's culture in so many ways. The burgeoning of sexual license, a burst of political, economic, and artistic power. The ethical conflicts between the sacred and the secular. The hand of the past being crushed by the present. Primary among these features, however, was invention. Improvisation, originality, change. Rather than be about those characters, the novel would seek to become them. My effort to enter that world was constantly being frustrated. I couldn't locate the voice or position the eye. The story opened with the betrayed wife intent on killing her rival. She stood there licking snowflakes from her top lip. Here she's referring to the original first sentence. Okay, perhaps. But nothing that could pull from the material or the people, the compositional drama of the period, its unpredictability. I knew everything about this wife, and angered by my inability to summon suitable language to reveal her, I threw my pencil on the floor, sucking my teeth in disgust, thinking, oh shoot, what is this? I know that woman. I know her skirt size, what side she sleeps on. I know the name of her hair oil, its scent. So that's what I wrote, effortlessly without pause. Just playing along with the voice, not even considering who the I was until it seemed natural, inevitable that the narrator would parallel and launch the process of invention, of improvisation, of change, commenting, judging, risking, and learning. I had written novels in which structure was designed to enhance meaning. Here the structure would equal meaning. The challenge was to expose and bury the artifice, and to take practice beyond the rules. I didn't want simply a musical background or decorative references to it. I wanted the work to be a manifestation of the music's intellect, sensuality, anarchy, its history, its range, and its modernity. She sang, my mother, the way other people muse, a constant background drift of beautiful sound I took for granted, like oxygen. Ave Maria, gratia plena. I woke up this morning with an awful aching head. My new man has left me just a room and a bed. Precious Lord, lead me on. I'm going to buy me a pistol just as long as I am tall. When the deep purple falls over hazy garden walls, I've got a disposition and a way of my own. When my man starts kicking, I let him find a new home. Oh, holy night. Like the music that came to be known as jazz, she took from everywhere, knew everything, gospel, classic, blues, hymns, and made it her own. How interesting it would be to raise the atmosphere, choose the palette, plumb the sounds of her young life, and convert it all into language as seductive, as glittery as an evening purse tucked away in a trunk. I mean, isn't that beautiful? I loved learning about Toni Morrison's writing process and learning a little bit about her as well. So the inspiration's definitely made for an interesting and compelling read. I know that Beloved gets a lot of love and attention, and it's deserved. But I think jazz also is deserving of some love, and I don't know that I have ever really heard a lot of people talk about this. And I never really heard about it before doing this project. So I'm looking forward to the third book in the trilogy and seeing how Toni Morrison approaches that and what themes she brings to it. So that brings me to the next book in the reading project, which is Paradise. And I will be reading this over the next week or so. And we'll be back with another video, which then should get us back on track with the schedule. So please let me know if you have read Jazz. What did you think? Did you like the story, the characters, the writing? If you've read both Beloved and Jazz, did you like one more than the other? I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. As always, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.